Hello everyone, and welcome to our Journeying Through the Bible study of Leviticus. You will see the questions and the scriptures down below in the description section. And so let's get right to it. I'm going to move to question 1. Please read Leviticus 19:13 through 15 first. And question 1 is, what does keeping wages until the morning mean? So any employers should not hold on to whatever wages are due their employees at the end of the day, because you never know what emergencies might come up from evening until morning. And if we start putting into practice a postponement of paying wages, then the next morning the employer might say, well, you're working for me all day long, so I'll pay you at the end of the day. And then at the end of the day might say, well, we've got more work tomorrow, so why don't we do... So this is this really quite wonderful care for the laborer in our midst and making sure that they get their pay day after day after day. Question 2, how amazing the instructions regarding the blind and the deaf in this ancient worldview, right? So even the Israelites were in danger of reviling the deaf and the blind and falsely judging them. We see this in the story of Jesus when the disciples asked about the blind man. Is he blind because of his sin or his parents' sin? And Jesus made clear it has nothing to do with either of those. So there was always this danger, and it still exists today with people who have no compassion for the developmentally disabled. And here we see in this ancient worldview, God wanting to make sure that we have compassion and love and mercy and care for the special children of God in our midst. Question 3, how does verse 15 point to common errors in judgment regarding the rich and the poor? So we see wanting to show partiality to both the rich and the poor, according to our political worldview oftentimes, but also just the natural human tendency inside us, according usually to our own upbringing. But the greater problem is showing deference to the great, I think. They're much more likely to get off of the justice that God wants for them because they have power, they have wealth, they can afford wealthy attorneys, they can influence people in the justice system, and the people of God may want favors from those rich folk, and so might be more likely to just sort of let them off the hook. But the opposite is also a problem. We can think of the hardship of the poor and their circumstances and their difficulties and use those difficulties and circumstances as an excuse for bad behavior. And while we need a range of punishments regarding bad behavior and breaking the law, we need to not let people off the hook. Bad behavior must be judged, and people need to learn that they can't do things that go against the will of God and hurt other people. So here in the law of God, we see compassion and care for the laborer, the developmentally disabled, the poor and the rich, and making sure that justice comes to all of them. And it's a wonderful thing. Verses 17 and 18, if you would read those from the same chapter, they're down below. Question 4, so reproving our neighbor is the opposite of hating them. So we are so hesitant in the modern world to sort of reprove and scold and judge. And here, this passage says that reproof is actually a part of loving our neighbor. And if we do not let people know about their bad behavior, then we ourselves incur guilt, which is fascinating. So when we know of wrong behavior, a part of loving our neighbors is to gently let them know about this. We, of course, need to take the log out of our own eye before we want to help others with the sliver in their own eyes. But Jesus' wonderful parable is trying to tell us that when we do that, and when we remove the sin from within ourselves, which affects our perception, then we go and help our neighbors as well with things that they are struggling with. Question 6. Finally, our judgments and justice must not result in what? And if we want mercy for our own mistakes, well, we must love our neighbors as ourselves and not bear grudges. So after we righteously and gently and lovingly judge others, mercy must be abundantly available because we ourselves want mercy and forgiveness when we make mistakes. So the law makes sure of that as well. Read, please, verses 20 through 22. And I bring up these verses. By the way, you can pause the video every time I ask you to read, and read those and consider the questions. So I bring up this passage as an example of something that is troubling with the law, because could a female slave really resist the will of her master? We know that, generally speaking, no. They might resist, but this is essentially a kind of slap on the wrist for a form of rape. And, it's not taken too seriously in this ancient worldview. And while there's a kind of a glimpse into how masters should not mistreat slaves, it is certainly not strict and strong enough. And we know how terrible, how wrong this is. And this is an example of how, while the law of God is a gift, it is also in need of constant reformation and renewal. Jesus renewed it up on the mountain when he gave his Sermon on the Mount. Paul renewed it and with his instructions regarding circumcision and dietary restrictions regarding Gentiles. And then our tradition throughout history has reformed the Old Testament law. And so we need to receive the law as a gift and continue to wrestle with it in order to figure out what is still in place and what needs reformation. Thanks so much for joining us, and God bless and keep you. I will probably have part 2 of this study available for you tomorrow. I look forward to your thoughts too. Please share them.